So, good afternoon. Hope you're doing well. Life is wonderful as usual. Last few lectures, we were discussing about position transducers, position sensors, transducers. If you are following the lectures, please watch the videos, please watch the lectures because whatever views I'm saying, the very few views I'm saying, I hope I'm doing well as a teacher. Slowly I'll improve. Please go through the lectures if you have not seen the lectures earlier. So last two lectures we discussed about position sensor transducers. This encoder is also one more position transducer we shall be discussing today. Uh, we discussed about potentiometric position sensor. We discussed about the linear potentiometric device as well as angular potentiometric device. Then we studied linear variable differential transformer as well. And briefly I discussed about rotary variable differential transformer. These two, as I ended up my last lecture telling you one aspect of these two transducers we studied, that was the potentiometric position transducer and the LVDT. These are essentially analog transducers. The signals they give out are analog signals. So the bulk voltage I get maybe millivolts, microvolts, or volts. In that analog form, I'll be getting the voltage. If I want to have a digital display, then I need to convert those analog signals into digital signals. Now today, what position sensors that we'll be studying today are called as encoders. Now encoders are essentially digital transducers. Once again, encoders are also position sensors, uh, but the only difference as compared to earlier transducers is that these encoders generate binary signals or digital signals directly. So the processing of this signal given out by encoders is easily accessible to the digital control system, as well as if I want to have a display of the output given by encoders, it is easily accessible. I don't need further signal conditioning. Much signal conditioning is not required. This is the biggest advantage of encoders. Now, if I go to the details of encoders, we'll be studying digital optical encoders today. Two types of encoders we come across when we make use of encoders in mechatronic applications. These are absolute digital optical encoders, and the second one is incremental digital optical encoder. Select some spotlight. Okay. Uh, so, as the name indicates, absolute digital optical encoders, they help me out in giving the absolute position, absolute exact position. That can be a linear position or that can be angular position. And whereas incremental optical encoders, digital optical encoders provide me not only position, but they can tell me about the distance traveled. They can tell me about the RPM in case of a shaft. So they can tell me about some form of velocity transformation even. So incremental are comparatively cheaper, and these incremental encoders are used for understanding what is the angular velocity, what is the angular distance traveled, or what is the linear distance traveled. Whereas if I want to know the exact position of my actuator or a device, there I use absolute digital optical encoders, and we'll study the applications later on. But these are widely used, these encoders are widely used in precision applications. Let it be a robotic arm position, let it be a mechatronic device wherein positional accuracy is of utmost importance. So let us first of all see the digital optical encoder, the construction. As you can see on the slide, this is the disc mounted on a shaft whose position, if I want to measure, if I want to sense, and use it for control of position of this shaft. Let us say this shaft and the disc corresponds to a radar which is tracking the aircraft, and the radar is just rotating for 360 degrees, and wherever there is enemy aircraft, this radar will position and identify the aircraft, and then the radar will send the signal as per my defense requirements. Now, the table on which this radar is mounted, let us say it is mounted on a table wherein I want to know what is the exact position at which my radar is. And for that, the actuator could be a DC motor which is just rotating this shaft and a radar. And presently, let us say it is at maybe 20 degree, some 12 minutes and 30-second angular position. And my command signal has sent the signal to the actuator, maybe a DC motor, that you have to position. The radar is to be positioned at maybe 40 degree or maybe 60 degree, 10 minutes and 12 seconds, whatever is the angular position. So that signal would be my actuating signal through my control system, and that will be compared with the positional signal given out by this optical encoder, and then these two signals are compared, and then whatever is the error in position, maybe presently it was at 10 degree angular position, I want to put this disc or the radar at maybe 40 degree angular position. So this correcting signal is given through a DC motor, and exactly the actuators will actuate the shaft and the radar with the desired position. So these encoders are doing two tasks. They are sensing the present angular position, plus after actuation, what is the next attained angular position. Now one can argue, why not to use a potentiometric device? Why not to use a rotary variable differential transformer? For two reasons, encoders are preferred. One is the digital form of the signal the encoders are generating, and second, the positional accuracy that I can sense or transduce or measure is better in case of encoders. Let us see the working of this digital encoder. If you just focus on this disk, I have got the slots or tracks, so to say, on the disk. And so in some disk there will be 3 tracks, in some disk there can be 5 tracks, depending upon the accuracy to which I want to measure my angular position. And as you can see on the left hand side, light emitting diodes or photo emitters are placed, and these light emitting diodes will be giving the light beam, and wherever there is a slot or a track, the light will be passing through it, and when there is no track, the light will not be passing through it. And on the other side of the disk, I have got a photo detector or a photo transistor which detects if any light falls on, light beam falls on it. So accordingly, if there is light beam, it will generate a pulse, and it is, as you can see, it is in a pulse form, it is in the digital form, ones and zeros, it is in the binary form. And this is for second track, and for first track I have got one more light beam. If it is falling on this photo detector, it will generate a signal. So these are the digital output signals, and in this figure it is more detailed description. This is the exact position, whatever IC I am using, some resistor is shown here. These are the signal conditioning devices. Now, this photo detector, when the light passes through, this is the rotating encoder disc, then the light passes through the track, and through the stationary mask, it falls on the photo detector. A pulse is generated, and that pulse will be processed through my signal conditioning device, and that digital signal will be utilized for display of my angular position. This is what is the construction. Now let us see the absolute encoder. As I said earlier, absolute digital optical encoders are used for precise position measurement. They are not interested. When we are not interested in understanding what is the distance traveled, and when we are not interested in knowing the velocities, angular velocities or linear velocities. Now, both these cases I have shown rotating shaft. Don't have that belief that these are used only for measuring angular position. No, I have got the encoder strips as well, which measure my linear position as well. Now the similar tracks would be there. As you can see there, I have got number of tracks. Outer track, first track, second track, third track, fourth track, fifth track. Like that, I have got number of tracks, and those many photodiodes, or sorry, so many photo emitters would be there. There'll be the light generating devices on one side of the disk, and on the other side I'll be having, if I got 7 tracks, I'll be having 7 photo detectors on the other side. So each track will be generating one binary digit, that is one digit. When I move from inside to outside, as you can see, bit 0, bit 1, bit 2, bit 3. Now, the number of tracks depends upon the number of positional accuracy I am interested in. Now, this LSB corresponds to least significant bit, and MSB corresponds to the most significant bit. That means if a digital number, if a decimal number is converted into a digital signal, let us say 1100, let us say, when I read from left to right, my leftmost number 1 is the most significant number. In my case, it depends on my requirement, and the rightmost number would be my least significant bit. So it is so to say whether I am interested in 2.001 degree of angular position, or if I am interested in maybe 2.000, maybe 4 zeros, 5 zeros, 1, 2, 3. If it is that signal, angular position signal is converted into, let us say, degrees, minutes, and seconds. If I go up to milliseconds, angular position. So the accuracy, the minimum resolution of position that I want, maybe 2 degree, 14 minutes, uh, 30 seconds, and maybe 20 milliseconds. To that accuracy, or to that significant digit, if I want to measure the position, I'll be having those many tracks. I hope you are understanding. So the number of bits depends on the accuracy or the positional details I'm interested in. So accordingly, this encoder will generate the pulses, and these would be converted into my digital signal form. If I want to read those numbers, I just want to measure those angular position values, I'll just measure. Or if those are to be used, as I told you one radar example, if those are to be used for controlling position of that radar disk, this signal, sense signal of present position, will be given to the controller, and this sense signal of present position, uh, after comparison with the expected value, the error signal would be generated, and that corrective angular position is provided through an actuator. That actuator could be a motor, it could be a hydraulic servo motor, maybe a pneumatic servo motor. The actuating devices can be many others. So this is how this absolute encoder helps us in sensing and transducing the position signal into appropriate digital signal. The resolution can be determined by the number of holes on the disk. With 100 holes in one revolution, the resolution would be 3.6 degrees. You can just divide this 360 degrees into number of holes. So to that positional accuracy, I can measure. So that would be the resolution. We have seen the static performance characteristics. That would be the resolution of this absolute encoder. If you just see here, an absolute encoder provides a unique position value or data word at every point of rotation, representing the absolute position of the encoder. From the moment you switch it on, an absolute encoder can tell you the exact position of the rotating shaft that it is measuring. So it essentially gives me information about the position of my rotating shaft. So I repeat, it is not just used for measurement of position of rotating shaft. I can have linear encoders as well. Let us see this incremental encoder now. Now this incremental encoder, as I said earlier, it not only gives me position alone, it can give me the distance traveled as well. Or it can give me RPM as well. Once again, unlike my absolute encoder, it will not be having more tracks along the radius. In absolute encoder, if you just refer back, you'll be having a number of tracks, track 1, track 2, track 3, track 4, like that. I'll have number of tracks. Here, limited tracks are there because my objective through incremental encoder is not to measure the exact position always, but I am interested more in the velocity of the disk. So once again, it is generating the digital signals. This track will be generating this digital signal, and it will be appropriate modified to show me the angular velocity. So, incremental encoders are commonly used to measure the speed. Incremental encoders are commonly used to measure the speed of mechanical systems. This may be done for monitoring purposes or to provide feedback for motion control or both. Whereas absolute rotary encoders can measure angular positions, while incremental rotary encoders can measure position, distance, and speed. So this is what is the differentiating factor between the the absolute encoder and incremental encoder. We'll move further. We'll go to proximity sensor. As the name indicates, earlier sensor transducers, those we have seen, there we measured the position, or we sensed the position, and we measured the distance traveled, we measured the velocities, angular velocities and linear velocities we measured. Whereas when my requirement is not to measure the distance, not to measure the velocity, but my objective is just to verify whether some obstacle is there in between or not. So I want to know whether there is some object in close proximity. I'm not specifying the distance also. Whether it is in close proximity, then my sensor transducer should generate a signal. Now, what are the situations wherein we'll be requiring proximity sensors? See, these are the 4 situations I've shown here. So these are the not beer cans, but these are soft drink cans. If I want to know if I have a counter, when these cans come in the path of this proximity sensor, it will generate a pulse. So that it can count the number of cans those have traveled. Then there is, on most of the cars, you have these proximity sensors at the back. If you're reversing back, before you dash some other person or some obstacle, the car will generate a beep. So I'll be having one proximity sensors, maybe 2 or 3, 4, depending upon my requirement, 4 proximity sensors, which will be sensing when some obstructions come in the path. They will start generating the beep to the driver so that the driver can stop without having the collision. So, and one more, at shop floor, you'll find that there are the material handling vehicles, or maybe automatically guided vehicles. So there also I can have my proximity sensors. If the material handling devices, trolleys are moving in the shop floor, and if some obstruction is there in the path, suddenly these proximity sensors will generate a signal, and they'll give the signal to the driving device, driving actuator of this vehicle, and so that the vehicle can instantaneously stop. Now, this is the familiar picture in many hospitals, many theaters, many auditoriums. Also, you'll find that there is a use of proximity sensor. Here, we are not measuring the distance as such, but the door is normally closed, and when you come in the path of that proximity sensor, when you just pass through, you cut that proximity sensor path, suddenly the door will be opened. And as you move, just move past the door will be once again closed. So these are the few examples of use of proximity sensors, wherein I'm not much interested in knowing the position or velocity of the object, but I'm interested more in the number count. I'm interested more in the closeness of the object, of the obstacle, and I want to take corrective action. In such cases, these proximity sensors are used. In industries also, many proximity sensors are used frequently. Now, there are three types of proximity sensors. Those will be studying in our curriculum. First is the optical proximity sensor. The second is the inductive type proximity sensor. The third one is capacitive type of proximity sensors. I repeat, here in proximity sensors and transducers, my objective is not to measure the distance, but I want to just ascertain whether the object of my interest is in close proximity, or I want to check whether there is no obstacle in the path of motion. There I'll be making use of this proximity sensor. The principles are very simple. Let us see first of all the optical sensor, how it works. So I have the optical device once again. I have a photo emitter, and that photo emitter, when the distance can also be set to what distance you want to sense whether there is any obstacle or any object that is coming in the path. So depending on whether this object is cutting this path of my light beam, in case of an optical sensor, accordingly it will be generating different voltages. Otherwise, for corresponding to different distances, as you can see in this figure, in this animation, this is my photo emitter, and the reflected light will be collected by the photo detector as well. So both emitter and detector are there in my this proximity sensing device. So depending on different distances, different voltages are generated by the photodiodes. Those are there inside this optical proximity sensor. So this is how these optical proximity sensors work. Now the second type is the inductive proximity sensors. Now, as the name indicates, these proximity sensors work on inductive principles. So something related to magnetism. So only limitation for inductive proximity sensors is that it can detect only metallic objects alone, because this magnetic field that is generated by my sensor should be affected by a metallic object, obstructing object, whose proximity or its closeness to my device is to be ascertained, or its close proximity is to be ascertained. So it detects a metal object, uses electromagnetic field to detect the conductive target. The sensing coil in the end of sensor, there is a sensing coil in the end of the sensor probe. When excited, it creates an alternating magnetic field which induces small amounts of eddy currents in the target object. Now these eddy currents create an opposing magnetic field which resists the magnetic field being generated by the sensor probe coil. The interaction of the generated magnetic field and the eddy current magnetic field give me the effective magnetic field which is sensed, and it gives me the signal whether there is an obstruction or not. These are, compared to optical sensors, these are comparatively inexpensive. So here the application: counting of products during production or transfer lines, detection of metal objects, maybe arms, landmines, etc. There we find the applications of these inductive proximity sensors. The same thing that is described earlier in the earlier slide. I have the inductive coil which is generating my magnetic field. Now this is the target or the object I want to identify whether it is in close proximity or not. So my amplifier, my triggering device is generating, through the oscillator it is generating the magnetic field, which is a pulsating magnetic field. It is generating, when this object is not there, there will be a fixed magnetic field, and that signal will be stored in the form of the voltage that is recorded for there is no object. Now when some objects, metallic objects, comes in the vicinity of this magnetic field, now what happens is, because this is the conducting target, target of the object, what happens is, as we know, as per Faraday's law, when the magnetic field is affected by a current, by a conducting device, magnetic conducting device, some stray currents would be induced. Those currents are called as eddy currents. Those will be generated in this target metallic obstructive plate. Now, when the current starts flowing, that current will have its own magnetic field once again, as per Lenz's law. As you can see, the arrows, those are shown, thumb rule, the direction of current is upwards and it will generate the magnetizing field. So these eddy current magnetic fields will interact with this my generated magnetic field. And whatever voltage that was generated when there was no obstructing magnetic field, that voltage signal will be affected when I have the obstructing magnetic field. So my impressed voltage will be changing, and that change in voltage either can give me the signal that there is one obstructing object, or even these things can be calibrated for distance even. So this is how the inductive proximity sensors are used for knowing the proximity of the objects or the proximity of the obstruction. Now let us see quickly the capacitive proximity sensors. Once again, these are meant for knowing whether there is some obstruction in close proximity. As you can see here in this relationship, the capacitance which is given in microfarad or farad is a function of area that is in contact, and then you have dielectric constant. This epsilon can be of two types. That epsilon can be of the dielectric medium that I have, and there can be epsilon naught also, that is epsilon naught of free space. Combined together, I have this epsilon, only single epsilon, that is so it is the dielectric constant of the gap medium. Typically it is air, it can be fluid also. So the third one, the third parameter on which this capacitance is dependent is the distance, gap distance between the probe and grounded target. This is the grounded target, and this gap, if the gap varies, the capacitance varies. As you can see from the relationship, if the gap increases, capacitance decreases because it is in the denominator. And as the area increases, probe sensing area increases, capacitance increases. So I can make use of, I don't normally change the medium, I can change the contact area, or I can change the distance. Now for my proximity sensing applications, I don't change even area also. So I change only distance. So this is the probe. When the target is moving, when it is moving, when there is this target is not there, let us say, the gap would be different and the capacitance that would be developed would be different. And in my balancing circuit, the potential drop across this circuit without the target will be some VC, capacitive voltage drop, when I don't have any target. And when I have some target or obstruction, this gap would be changing. So without the target, this distance would be this much, and with the target, this distance should be this much. So D is changing as the distance is reduced, so capacitance would increase, and my potential drop across the balancing circuit of this capacitive proximity sensor would change. So the change in potential drop because of capacitance change. Now this capacitance change is because of distance change or gap change, and this gap change is because of there is some obstruction or some object coming in the path of my capacitance. So this is how this proximity sensor works. It is also widely used in industrial applications, industrial mechatronic applications. So the sensing surface of the sensor, this is a commercial figure, the same thing, the target, and then I have the shielding fields, and this is my main field. The sensing gap is mentioned here. So conducting wire is in between, the grounded shell is there, the guard ring is there, and this is the guarded field, which is protecting my targeting field, okay, so to say. So this is how the construction is there. The sensing surface of sensors probe is the electrified plate. The sensor electronics continuously changes the voltage on the probe surface. The amount of current required to change is what is measured, which indicates the amount of capacitance distance between the probe and the target. Can be used for non-metallic materials such as paper, glass, liquids, and cloth. Unlike my inductive proximity sensors, in inductive proximity sensors, I require the conducting metallic surface, whereas in capacitive proximity sensors, I can sense the distances or the obstructions because of paper, glass, the non-electrically conducting materials as well, even cloth. So this is the relative benefit. Quickly we'll go through the applications of these proximity sensors. These are used in process control applications. As you can see, feed hopper level monitoring, small vessel pump control, level control of liquids in metrology applications to measure shape errors in the part being produced, to analyze or optimize the rotation of spindles, various machine tools, surface grinders, lathes, milling machines, and assembly line testing. In assembly line testing, that to test the assembled part for uniformity, thickness, and other design features. So these proximity sensors are used for these applications. Hall effect sensor, I think we are running short of time. The time is already up, just 2-3 minutes are there. We'll discuss about this Hall effect sensor in the next class. So, thanks for watching. Please be involved in the lectures. Maybe at leisure time, go through the lectures. No doubt I'll be uploading these lectures on YouTube as well after processing the lectures. So do take very good care of yourself. Be attentive, come in tune with the curriculum, see the videos I am posting, think of some projects. Okay, God bless you all. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your wonderful Guru Purnima wishes. I hope you'll be living up to your own expectations as well as our all Guru's expectations as well. God bless you all. Thank you.